The floor to Trey McGowan. He'll lob it for his... Oh, my goodness! A one-hand hammer!
On 90.3 KRNU, it's Huskers Hoops Live.
You betcha! Jazz Shelley has a triple-double!
Now, here's your host, Jacob Schrantz.
Welcome into Huskers Hoops Live, the show where you can expect to find great coverage of both Nebraska men's and women's basketball all season long. I'm your host, Jacob Schrantz. I am from Orchard Park, New York, small town right outside of Buffalo, New York. I'm a sophomore here at UNL, double majoring in sports media and communication and also broadcasting. I love sports media and I love college basketball.
To be honest,
sorry about that. Just a little bit of technical difficulties here. It is the pilot episode. That's going to happen. But let's get into a little bit of an overview of what you can expect every Tuesday morning here on Huskers Hoops Live. So we're going to have game recaps and reactions to all the action, whether it be men's, women's, whatever going on that week. There will be previews for the week's upcoming events. There will be games all throughout the week that we'll be covering each and every Tuesday morning. We'll break down the season up to that point for both the men's and the women's team and get to know the teams a little bit better throughout the year. We'll have some reactions to news for both teams, breaking news in the Big Ten Conference. The Big Ten, one of the most competitive conferences in the entire college basketball world. Really interesting stuff out of there every week. We'll have even potentially some more interviews with the media, players, coaches. That's all going to be up to you, the listeners, as we need some input and engagement with the show in order to put together those interviews for you. But I really enjoy doing that, as it's a great way to kind of tell the story of the team and the season as we move forward into the winter. Now, let's get into a little bit of what everyone here can expect on the pilot episode of Huskers Hoops Live. Coming up today, I'll be going over last season for the men's and women's team. After that, we'll transfer into what the Huskers fans can expect for this 2022-23 season from Coach Williams and Coach Hoiberg's teams. I'll get into some of the players to watch for each team. Will it be some impact transfers? Will it be the seniors, newcomers? You'll see. There will be a little bit of a feature on the freshman class coming in this season for the men's team. And then we'll talk a little bit about the women's team ranking and reacting to the way too early top 25 ranking that Coach Williams and this Huskers women's basketball team received over the summer. And then lastly, we'll wrap up the show with an interview with the one and only Matt Coatney, who Huskers fans have grown fond of for his iconic calls on the Huskers Radio Network for women's basketball. Now, let's get into a little bit of a recap for last season. We'll start with the women's team here. It was a special season. Last year, Nebraska tied a school record 16 home wins, 16-2 overall at PBA. Very impressive stuff there. 24-9 overall record, 11-7 in the conference. Struggled on the road though, 5-6, and they were 3-1 in neutral sites. So it was really just that road environment that this Nebraska team wasn't quite able to handle as well as they would like to. However, a lot of this success was seen in the crowd and the attendance. Ranked 18th nationally in attendance with an average showing at PBA of over about 4,500 fans. That's going to be something that the Huskers lean on going forward, as PBA was absolutely packed and roaring anytime this women's team showed up. Nebraska led the conference with 24 wins overall, and that was really impressive going up against teams like Iowa and Michigan in the regular season. Michigan ranked for most of the year, Iowa as well. So to lead the conference in total wins as a pretty young team relatively, Nebraska really showed out in that category. And then talking about a little bit of the team from last year, Jazz Shelley really led the way for this Huskers team. Led Nebraska in scoring with over 13 points per game, had 56 steals and 30 blocks, both of those good for first on the team in that category. And ladies and gentlemen, she is only 5'9", and she is back for the 2022-23 season. Jazz Shelley, high expectations, and she showed out last year. And she was just huge on offense and defense all season. It really cannot be understated. I mean, she was named to the All-Big Ten second team and Big Ten All-Defensive team. Two-way player on the wing at the guard position. Jazz Shelley is special. But there were some other women who made their name known for Big Red a year ago. Alexis Markowski, the Big Ten Freshman of the Year, all Big Ten second-teamer with Shelley. She led Nebraska in total points with 421 in just her freshman year. It was an amazing first year for her in the scarlet and cream uniforms. She was able to get the job done on the inside mostly, but she could shoot the three ball as well. 50% on the season on 42 attempts, shot just under 50% from the field. She was almost unguardable. I mean, just drawing fouls left and right, going to the free throw line, which really was one of her only weaknesses on the season. About 66% from the line last year. That'll be something she has definitely worked on this year to become a better player. Moving on, Alison Widener, another one of the breakout freshmen for Coach Williams. She was absolutely tremendous in her minutes. About 7 points per game, just under 4 rebounds and 2 assists in just under 20 minutes of play. She mostly came off the bench last year, but with the injury to Sam Hybee, Alison Widener definitely looking to get some more minutes, maybe even in the starting lineup. We'll have to see. And then other freshmen like Kendall Coley and Kendall Moriarty added some depth on the wing for scoring. And Izzy Bourne and Sam Hybee last year especially looked really consistent and pretty calm throughout the season, both at around 11 points per game. And just to recap the season, the Huskers lost to Iowa in the Big Ten tournament. Caitlin Clark, she gave NU a 40-piece in that one, and Big Red eventually went on to the NCAA tournament and lost in the first round to Gonzaga in March. Ended the season with an overall record of 24-9. Overall, really good stuff from the women's team, and now a little bit different of a story when you look at the men's team from last year. It was a tough season for Fred Hoiberg last year, 10-22 overall, just 4 conference wins, 3 of those coming in back-to-back-to-back wins over Ohio State, Penn State, and Wisconsin. And that Wisconsin game may have been the most exciting game of basketball all year for Nebraska men's basketball. And the season started out really, really tough. 12 straight losses to conference opponents before finally getting that all-evasive win against Minnesota on February 9th at PBA. The Huskers went on another losing streak of 4 conference games before, of course, winning those last 3 regular season games, Penn State, Ohio State, and Wisconsin, all on the road, I might add. And it was all about freshman sensation Bryce McGowan's last year. In wins or losses, he averaged just under 17 points per game to lead the team and was eventually drafted in the second round of the NBA draft by the Minnesota Timberwolves with pick number 40 and was later moved to the Charlotte Hornets, a rare Nebraska one-and-done talent. He was spectacular to watch all season long. Alonzo Verge, one of the transfer guards coming to Nebraska last year, led the team in assists with 169. That was more than 120 assists than the next closest, Derek Walker. Verge's clutchest game, he really came out in the Wisconsin kind of late season effort to take down the Badgers on their senior day. He had 21 points, 9 assists, 7 rebounds, and also added 4 steals in that one. I mean, this guy was just an amazing player to watch all night against Wisconsin and really all season, as he was definitely the best facilitator offensively for Nebraska. CJ Wilcher last year, another transfer coming to Nebraska, contributed on the wing a little bit. Had some well-timed threes as he led the team in three-pointers made with 52 and in percentage just over 40% at 40.6. And Derek Walker, lastly, just kind of chipped in his usual way. Pretty efficient stuff from Derek Walker. Led the team in field goal percentage at over 68%, which was a career best for him, and he's going to be back for the 2022-23 season. Now we go from last year to this coming season. Some season expectations for the men's team. 4 of NU's scoring leaders from last year, they're no longer here. Bryce McGowens, Alonzo Verge, Kobe Webster, and Lat Mayen. This means it will be up to CJ Wilcher, Derek Walker, to up their games even a little bit more for Nebraska to have some success into the winter of 2023. Some newcomers for Nebraska will also need to step up as well. Sam Griesel, Denham Dawson, who joined the team last winter out of high school, reclassified. And you'd got to think that could help his transition level from high school, right? You'd practice with the team last year. You get some minutes. Well, you don't get some minutes, but you get some practice minutes under your belt. So we'll see if that helps him out in 2023. Emmanuel Bandumel, who really stood out in the opening night event for Nebraska. He had a lot of leaping ability, but let's talk about some of these newcomers for 2023. Sam Griesel, a transfer from North Dakota State, but he's returned home to his hometown of Lincoln, Nebraska for his senior season. And for Griesel, there are some high expectations. First team All-Summit League selection last year, averaged over 14 points per game and 3 assists, and he is a big guard that can rebound and pass. This will be a little bit of a change from Alonzo Verge and Kobe Webster, especially as Griesel is 6'7", but he can handle the ball a bit on the perimeter and get his teammates involved. So it's really exciting to see what Sam Griesel can do against some of this Big Ten talent. And then you add in Denham Dawson, who joined the team in the winter, obviously, like I just said, and his athleticism will be definitely needed for this Nebraska team as they lose both Bryce and Trey McGowens, two of the guys who I would say maybe the best athletes on the floor at all times. They put together some nice posterizing dunks all throughout last season. So Denham Dawson, one of the highest flyers on the team, really excited to see what he's got. And you want to talk about dunks, Emmanuel Bandama, like I just mentioned a little bit earlier. If any Nebraska fans missed the opening night event, you missed some insane dunks in the open court during warm-ups and a little bit of a pre-3-point contest dunk showcase from Bandama. He's only 6'4", but he can rise up with the best of them on this team, and he added a high-flying, player to this Nebraska offense. He relies on speed and getting into the lane, and he really showed that in the opening night event, and I think that's a great fit in Fred Hoiberg's offense that kind of relies on that getting into the lane to either finish strong or kick out to an open shooter. I think Bandama could be very successful in that system. And looking forward into the schedule a little bit for Nebraska, they have a tough early non-conference schedule, matchups against St. John's on the road, Oklahoma in late November, and of course in-state rival the Creighton Blue Jays on December 4th. And Nebraska will be looking for virtually all new kind of offensive leaders at key positions, but if they get some career seasons by the likes of some of the senior transfers in Griesel and Emmanuel Bandama, look out. But you want to talk about looking out, you got to look out for this 2023 women's basketball team for Nebraska. After one of Coach Amy Williams' best seasons last year, it has to be. This team has no intentions of slowing down coming into the fall. I mean, they faced devastating news earlier this fall that veteran guard Sam Hybe was lost for the season after an unfortunate knee injury that will hold her out for some time, but Nebraska will need an uptick in production from the likes of Widener and a couple of the newcomers. Callan Hake and Maddie Kroll, two new Huskers, they looked very active in their debut at opening night. The starters in the scrimmage in that one were Jazz Shelley, Alexis Markowski, Izzy Bourne, Trinity Brady, and Alison Widener. If this is the starting lineup to start the season, Nebraska has a lot of upside to look forward to, in my opinion. First, you look at Markowski and Widener. They're only touching the surface of what they could be as players if you believe Matt Coatney coming up in just a bit, and I do. Both were really, really good in their first year at Nebraska, and once they continue to develop their games, especially in their second go-around really with this Big Ten conference, they go from last year, it's the first time they've seen that level of play. Now they have a little bit of experience under their belt. They should be a little bit more comfortable in their game and in those environments, whether that is a high-energy, packed crowd at PBA or on the road facing those student sections talking trash. And then you look at another person in Annika Stewart, who I think is going to get an increased role as well, maybe off the bench. She was highly involved in the scrimmage on opening night, got some shots inside, also put up a couple perimeter shots, which is really one of her strong suits. So just under 40% from three as a career three-point shooter. And Nebraska will get some interesting non-conference matchups as well to test themselves early on. We talked about how the men's team has that tough non-conference schedule, and the women's team is no different. They've got Creighton, Mississippi State, Virginia Tech, Wyoming, and Kansas kind of to lead the names in that non-conference schedule to start the year. And then you move into December, and it'll be conference play the rest of the way until March. 3 Sweet 16 teams of last year are included in the Big Ten schedule, and Nebraska, if they want to go to the dance again, they have got a tough road ahead of them. However, Nebraska's one of the better teams in the conference, I'd say, this year, and even though you lose a guard like Sam Hybe for the season, someone who can virtually do it all on both ends, I think Nebraska still has the senior leadership in Jazz Shelley and Izzy Bourne and kind of that young talent to match them with Alexis Markowski and Alison Widener to really just balance out a deep and hungry roster, I would say, that wants to not only make it to March Madness again, but really go deep in the tournament. And I think they have every chance to do just that. And when we come back from this quick break on Huskers Hoops Live, we will get into some of the players to watch for this women's team. Back on Huskers Hoops Live, let's get into some of these players to watch. We'll look starting at the men's team here. CJ Wilcher, Derek Walker, and Sam Griesel are my three players that I'm really interested to see what they do here in the 2023 season. Wilcher, team's best three-point shooter last year. He'll need to continue to be that, and maybe even a little bit more for the Huskers on offense, in what I think could be a better season for Wilcher than last year even. Go to Derek Walker, almost shot 70% from the field in 2022. Watch for Coach Hoiberg to continue to use Walker primarily as an inside finisher, also with some slight playmaking upside on kickouts, to the corner and to the wing when he's bombarded with defenders at the rim, as that is his main offensive, production. And then you look at Sam Griesel, the newcomer. Biggest question mark for this season for the Huskers, I think, but his size on the perimeter should really help him fit kind of with most, if not all, the guards in Nebraska's rotation, making Sam Griesel a key piece to the success of the Huskers this season. And then going to the women's team, Alexis Markowski, she was already dominant last season, but after her first offseason of work, she should come back even stronger. And head coach Amy Williams recently in a press conference talked a little bit about Alexis Markowski. And let's hear from Coach Williams in that press conference.
To be honest with you, I asked her what she wants to work on. And, she's motivated and driven to, she wants to finish a little bit at a higher clip and higher percentage. And she's worked incredibly hard to do that. She's been putting in a lot of work just to improve 1% her footwork on certain things inside and just expanding her game so that people can't get to her to double quite so quickly and certain things. So, and she's continued to really work hard on her perimeter game and perimeter shooting and just confidence in that area. And we're seeing all that hard work that she's had in the postseason, offseason, starting to really come together and pay off.
That was Coach Amy Williams on Alexis Markowski into her first offseason. And two other players on the women's team to watch out for, Alison Widener and Annika Stewart. Starting with Widener, you look at Sam Hybe missing for the rest of the year. Widener really is the clear favorite to kind of step into that other guard spot next to Jazz Shelley and run a little bit of a dual ball handler backcourt, similar to what you might see in the NBA with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell now for the Cleveland Cavaliers, or kind of in years past with Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. A lot of upside with that Shelley-Widener backcourt. And then you look at Annika Stewart to round things out for the players to watch this season for Nebraska women's basketball. She'll likely get kind of that backup spot and split the minutes between the 4 and the 5, filling in whenever Alexis Markowski or Izzy Bourne kind of need a breather to go to the bench. She's got great shooting off the bench from the perimeter, and to have that skill by one of your taller forwards off the bench, that is an absolute cherry on top for this Nebraska offense. Something that will be very difficult for the rest of the Big Ten to deal with, especially off the bench. Moving forward, let's get a little bit of a recruiting class feature for this men's basketball team. And the top freshman that Nebraska brought in this year is Ramel Lloyd Jr. from Long Beach, California. Lloyd, he comes to Nebraska playing high school ball for Sierra Canyon. And, of course, if any high school basketball fans are listening, you know that is the same place where Bronny James kind of put some buckets down. Bronny James, one of the most hyped prospects in recent years, and Ramel Lloyd got some playing time along on the same roster. Lloyd, a top 100 recruit out of high school by 24/7 Sports, and was also a 4-star according to ESPN's ranking as well. So kind of a consensus high-level player in Ramel Lloyd, both ESPN and 24/7 Sports agreeing that Lloyd is one of the best out of high school. In his senior season, Ramel averaged over 11 points per game, 4 rebounds, just under 2 assists. He should be able to learn kind of some of those guard skills from the veterans already on the roster, and Sam Griesel and Emmanuel, of course, over the season. And then Denham Dawson as well. He's a redshirt freshman this year. He did come to Nebraska a little bit early through a reclassification and has 4 seasons left at Nebraska to play, but he didn't play in any games last year. And I'm thinking this season it may be a little bit easier for Denham Dawson to kind of transition into the college game, as he's already worked through the routine of a weekly schedule, pregame routine, kind of that work and shoot around before each and every game. I think that could lead to some early season success for this high-flying freshman. And then you look at the rest of the recruiting class: Cale Jacobson, Henry Burt, Jamarcus Lawrence, Oleg Konetz, and Karan McPherson, who unfortunately will miss this season with an injury, but still listed as a redshirt freshman on the roster. They make some of the rest of this recruiting class for Nebraska. And now, sort of winding down here, the women's team preseason was one of the top 25 teams in the country, ranked number 22 in the way too early rankings by ESPN back in mid-June, kind of that mid-summer area where teams are still filling each other out. But they were ranked in the top 25, which is something that Nebraska fans were really excited about, as they kind of earned this reputation after posting an impressive competitive record against some of the tougher teams that you could face in all of college women's basketball in the Big Ten. And with that ranking kind of came a little bit of relief, as a lot of Huskers fans believed that last year's team deserved to be ranked in the top 25 nationally much more frequently than they were. I mean, they were 24-9 overall. They had wins over ranked teams like Michigan in the regular season, so they had those marquee wins, but didn't quite see as much of the rankings as they may have deserved. But this 2022-23 season marks another opportunity for Nebraska women's hoops to stake their claim atop the Big Ten Conference. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to bring to you all the Matt Coatney interview that I did recently. He is the first guest now in Huskers Hoops Live history. He had a lot to say about the women's team kind of coming into this season, and let's hear what he had to say. He also shared some interesting background about his life growing up in Missouri. And, you know, there's really only one way to send it through. Is this interview going to be great? You betcha it is. Huskers Hoops Live with Matt Coatney here today, Jacob Schrantz for the interview. And Matt, it's a very big honor to have you as the first guest on Huskers Hoops Live.
I am honored to be here with you. Best of luck with the show. And obviously, I love talking about Huskers sports, whatever it is, especially women's basketball. So I'm honored and humbled. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I'm sure your schedule this fall has been pretty busy with football going on and now with the basketball season coming up. How's that been for you?
This will be my 10th year of the crossover between the football broadcast and basketball broadcast intersecting. I love it. It's a fun time of year. I'm heading into my 23rd year on the women's basketball broadcast. I love what I do. The Huskers have been so great to me, and it's a fun time of year. Busy, no doubt about it. I've done the football studio anchor gig on the road with Husker women's basketball in so many places. Last year did the football broadcast in San Diego, did the whole football broadcast, and then called a women's basketball game after that. So if you're a sports person, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, weekends filling up very quickly, I'm sure, for you. But let's start it off with just a little bit of fun. Nebraska last year won a program record 16 home games, ranked top 20 in attendance in the nation as well, just under 4,500 fans per game at PBA last year. How would you compare the atmosphere calling the Huskers games last year to some of the years previous in your tenure here?
Well, keep in mind, in the year before that, I was not in any arena because the network made a decision, and I was fully supportive of that. Kent Pavelka and I did not go to any games live. We did every game in a studio in the Haymarket. Everything was off a video feed. And, when it was allowed one summer ago, so it would have been about, 15 months ago, when I could come back to practice, and the team invited me to practice. Amy Williams stopped practice and circled everybody up and had me talk to the team. That was very emotional. And when the first event, the night before we played the exhibition game, where I watched practice from my seat at PBA, I started to cry because, basketball broadcasting is very much a feel for the game. The thing I missed was the fans. I missed being able to see the official out of my peripheral vision. I missed being able to talk to the coaches before the game. So there was a great atmosphere last year, and, your question would be very much viable no matter if COVID had happened or not, but it was magnified. So I'll answer your question based on before the pandemic. It was wonderful last year. And I think the fans really got behind this team for a couple of reasons. Great leaders and some dynamic freshmen who came through the door ready to dance. And I'm talking about Alexis Markowski and Alison Widener, who are local products. I think the whole town of Humphrey came down for most of the games to see Alison Widener. And the fans fell in love, and I mean absolute love, with Jazz Shelley and the way she played. So you've made a great point. The attendance, the home wins, and I'll bring it being back in after the pandemic. It was really something special.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to get into the pandemic a little bit because I know in the few broadcasts that I've done, the game day routine and kind of preparation before the game is really important. So how did your kind of routine pregame get impacted by having to do it not from PBA, but rather from a studio, like you said?
Well, it affected everything. My pregame visit with the coach is very important, not necessarily for the recorded piece that you hear on the radio, but for really getting a feel for the coach. If you've got that great relationship with your coach, which I've been very lucky to have through my years, Hall of Fame coaches, and Amy Williams is right at the top. They know that I'm not trying to give away secrets. They know I'm not trying to say something injurious to the teams, but I can, I call a better game if I know what's going on. So they are more apt to use that time to tell me, look for this today. I miss that. I would have to find some very interesting technological ways of interviewing a coach for the pregame show, which is sponsored and we're required to do, where they're on some software we'd have to load on their phone and set up a time. And, that was terrible. And the other thing is I'm very good friends with many coaches in the league or some of the non-conference opponents. For example, we're going to play Wyoming this year. Their new head coach is Heather Rozelle, who went to my high school in Springfield, Missouri many years ago, and great guard at Iowa State when Nebraska was in that league. And Heather seeks me out, I seek her out. And so, I wasn't able to see the coaches, and this sounds strange, I wasn't able to see the officials. And, I learn a lot from the officials. They really don't make themselves too available pregame, but if you're there early enough, you might be able to talk to them about some rule changes. And so it affected everything on the pregame, and being able to talk to the other teams, play-by-play announcer, is invaluable in being able to gain some information about, hey, everybody's mispronounced this kid's name. The pronunciation guide's wrong in the notes. This is how you say it. Or, hey, they're not going to make a big deal about it, but this kid isn't playing. It's not, a permanent thing, so don't make a big deal about it. It changed everything. Anybody really can be taught how to move the ball around the floor, but knowing how to tell that story and paint that picture, not being able to talk to people in person pregame was really hard to deal with.
Yeah, I'm sure we're all very grateful for now being able to get that live atmosphere back. But let's take it back a little bit. You grow up, you're from Springfield, Missouri. You go to Kickapoo High School, where really your sports announcing future, that was kind of like the launching pad for that. Talk about that a little bit and some of the experience at your high school.
I was the luckiest guy in the world living in the early 1980s in Springfield, Missouri. And cable TV was new. It had failed twice on an election ballot because people didn't understand why they needed it. So the city council, to approve it, made the cable company provide 500 hours of educational programming and put live broadcast lines in each high school. The first one they did was my high school. because they had a media class. And Tony Loudis, who is one of the main reasons I'm here talking to you, allowed me and some other people to do whatever we wanted, but we were told to do anything we could sports related to try and get those 500 hours, put a camera on a parakeet, something, so the cable company could meet their charter. So we did every sporting event we could, commercial free, with one camera. And so it was such a great experience for me, learning how to ad lib, learning how to describe all kinds of sports. The 7th place game in a volleyball tournament on Saturday is not the most compelling broadcast. So learning how to interview coaches when you don't have time to prepare, and learning how to fill time and being interesting about it, and learning how to use a mixer, learning about the difference between a unidirectional mic and an omnidirectional, and not just learning it in a class, but here, touch this and tell me what the difference is, and learning it opened so many possibilities for me. And I know how lucky I was, because in those days, most people only had 13 channels of cable television. We were on channel 11. So if you were flipping around 9, 10, 11, I'll never forget, a lady came out at a tournament and brought me a plate of cookies. And I don't know anything about sports, but I've been stuck on your channel all Christmas listening to you. You're doing a great job. I've been making Christmas cookies. I thought I'd bring some to you. So,
wow.
The power of that really kind of hit me as a young man. So it just launched so many things for me.
And you talk about the impact of Tony Loudis on your life. Do you still see those skills that he helped you develop back in high school still kind of impact your life today?
Oh, I can't even begin to tell you, because, Tony was kind of a younger teacher back then, and he could deal with some of the, I think broadcasters all share one thing: we're alphas. And when you're a 16-year-old alpha, I'm sure not every teacher could handle someone who thinks they're good or thinks their voice sounds great. And Tony let us experiment. And, what I've done when I've worked with younger broadcasters is to give them room to make mistakes. Tony gave us lots of room to make mistakes. And I will tell you that, and it's not just me, there's several of us who have went on to do some really great things. Tony is so proud, and I still keep in touch with him. And I just really, he was one of the people who taught me that teachers are here and they're interested in us. And, you can give back at times. And I try and do those things with young people that I mentor through time.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was about to ask about, so much wisdom coming from him. What kind of have you passed down to maybe your kids or just young broadcasters who you've talked to?
Well, Tony was an English teacher first and foremost. And, what I tell people is, if people like listening to a broadcast, if you think about it, I'm and Kent Pavelka, any of us on the Huskers Radio Network, we're basically moving a ball around a field, a court, a pitch, and lots of people do that. So what separates people? And what I got from Tony is, you better understand the English language. Do you like listening to someone like a James Earl Jones? Well, he speaks the language properly. Make sure you understand what an adverb is and use it correctly, not correct. And make sure that people like listening to you, whether you're describing a ball going through a basket or a volleyball getting killed, because people do appreciate listening to people they think speak the language at least as well as they do, or hopefully maybe even a little better. It's not fun to listen to somebody who it's hard to follow, or you notice mistakes. And I think, one of the great things Tony really gave to me is, make sure you understand the language, you speak it well, and you have a large vocabulary. And that's one small thing, but that's what I always point out to people.
Yeah, so you take all that wisdom, you move forward, you end up going to Southwest Missouri State University. And doing some of the research for this interview, I looked at some of the majors there. I don't see a sports media. I don't see a broadcasting in general. So what was it there that kind of got you continued into this path of announcing games?
Yeah, electronic media. And I'll tell you, by the time that I got to what was then SMS, and they've changed their name now to Missouri State, Through Kickapoo High School, Rob Evans, who has done a lot of minor league baseball through the years, had become the sports director at a TV. It was a cable TV station, but I would say it was very similar to what Nebraska Public Television does with sports. They would do an SMS game, a small college game, every Friday night, a high school football or basketball game. And he had just gotten a job in Beaumont, Texas with the San Diego Padres AA team. And so at age 18, I became sports director of Telecable of Springfield with a 30-minute, once a week show where I was sitting down with a St. Louis Cardinal. I was sitting down with an NFL player, three cameras, a sit-down show, and I was doing a high school game on a Friday night, and a local radio station had me doing a Thursday night game. And so when I joined college at Missouri State and I started becoming an electronic media major, I was a student assistant in sports information. And my all-time idol growing up was Art Haynes. And Art was the voice of the Bears. Art had been the studio anchor for Dallas Cowboys pregame and postgame radio back in the days when Vern Lundquist was doing the Cowboys after Frank Gleaver left. And Art had come back to Springfield and got to know me through all of the stuff I was doing on local radio and TV. And in 1985, I'd been doing stat crew on basketball and got to know the coaching staffs pretty well. The university decided they wanted to have a play-by-play announcer for women's basketball. We were the first school in the old Gateway Conference to broadcast women's basketball. And Art called me as a 20-year-old sophomore, said, "Matt, we want you to do it." And I was on a 50,000-watt FM big stick station. And I went on the road and started calling Lady Bears basketball. And Art has went on now to be the studio anchor for the Kansas City Chiefs radio broadcast with Mitch Holtis. And Art is still a mentor of mine. And I really try and emulate him on everything I do on the football broadcast. So that was a humongous catapult to my career, getting to call Division I basketball at the age of 20 as a sophomore in college.
Yeah, and you get into that women's basketball role. Is there something about women's basketball that is really special to you over the men's teams?
Well, it's been part of my life for, 37 years now. And, I remember when Paul Sandiford was our coach here, and Paul really was the one who brought me to Nebraska. He used to be at Western Kentucky, went to 2 Final Fours, and I sat down with him one day, and I kind of asked him the question in a different way. Many people have asked me, "Oh, you think you could do men's basketball?" And I looked at Paul and I said, "You ever thought about coaching men's basketball?" And he told me, "Coaching basketball is the same, but I stay in women's basketball because my recruiting contacts at the high school and AAU level are all there. If I went to coach men's basketball, I wouldn't get any players because I don't have any connections." I vote on many boards right now. I'm on the Naismith Board of Selectors for National Player of the Year, among other things that I do. And I really think people like me should be doing that because, I've been around women's basketball since it became an NCAA sport and transferred from AIAW. My friends are in women's basketball. The officials across the country, I know them. I know so many coaches, and it's just part of my life. It's hard to explain, but it's probably the reason. I'm not trying to compare myself to John Madden. Don't think that, but think about what an easy transition it was for John Madden when he left coaching the Oakland Raiders and went into TV, and then he went to talk to a coach at a practice. Well, how many of those coaches were either on his staff or he competed against? And it's a lot like me. When Nebraska plays Northwestern's coach, Joe McEwen's daughter is Megan McEwen, who is doing a great job with her broadcasting career. Joe always comes and talks to me. It's very natural for me. And so women's basketball has always been a part of my life, not because I had some undying love of women's basketball in 1985, but because I was offered a job in it, and they've been so good to me at many stops in my life that it's just, it's like breathing to me, really.
Yeah, and you build your career off of that as well. And going from, you live in Missouri, you go to Missouri State, and then moving to a Big Ten school in Nebraska, was there any sort of concerns about moving from out of state to take on this new role?
Well, I didn't come here really to do women's basketball. My mother-in-law was dying in Florida, and my wife, her sister lived in Beatrice, and she wanted to be near family, and I'll live anywhere. And so I had no idea the best part of my broadcasting career was coming up because I was going to get out of it. And I got up here, and Eric Rodewald, the KWBE in Beatrice, I got to know him a little bit, and he said, there's a guy down here who's the head coach in Nebraska, and I told him you were living here, and he said, give him a call. And Paul Sanford was, he had a couple of people from Broadcast House here in Lincoln that were doing their games, but, it was a different person every week. And he goes, I'm looking for somebody who, has their own job, doesn't want to be on ESPN, knows the history of women's basketball. And Paul knew I had been the voice of Missouri State, and we played Western Kentucky 3 times, during that era. So Paul really brought me here, and it was probably good for me because I really appreciated doing games because, I really didn't have any choice in moving up here. So, it wasn't the best thing is when I left Missouri State, my best friend Don West took that over, and he took it and he ran with it. But was there a concern about doing it? It probably felt that I didn't know I was going to do it till about a month before I did. And it's just been amazing.
Yeah. And, you bring so much joy because obviously you've been a part of the women's basketball kind of scene for so long now, but something I'm interested in, where did the catchphrase "you betcha" come from? Because it's just become so iconic in Lincoln and for anyone who listens to Huskers basketball. So for all these years, how did you develop something so iconic?
I wish that I had a great developmental story for you, but dumb luck. In 1994, I mentioned Don West. He and I were doing Missouri State against Drake. Drake's coach was Lisa Bluter, who now has had a great career at Iowa. And Melody Howard was the shooting guard for Missouri State, and she had a chance to tie the record for number of threes in a game, which at the time was 11, set by Danielle Viglione from Texas. And when Melody hit her 11th, Don said, "Can she hit another one? You betcha she can." So I got up here to Nebraska, and streaming was kind of a new thing in the early 2000s. And Don and I, every once in a while, will let each other know we're listening. And, we kind of gauge how people are doing and give little suggestions. But if someone's listening, and I don't know if you've ever done this, but sometimes I do things for one person. Let's say the term $60 means something to a friend of mine, and I know they're listening. I'll make a joke about $60, and the fans don't know, but I do. And so I knew Don was listening. And so there was some meaningless 3 in the game. And I knew he knew. I gave it a big "you betcha" that he'd know that I was referring to that Melody Howard 3 against Drake. I get home, my son Nate, who was a teenager, said, "Hey, you need to stay with that 3-point call." And I said, "What 3-point call?" Had no idea what he was talking about. And then we come out to the next game, and across from me, behind the scores table, Abby Swatsworth had a sign that said "you betcha." And she continues to bring that sign to every game. And so I thought, what happened here? And then the Stewart family from Aurora came in the next game with a red sign that said "you betcha" and "can you sign this?" And it's become a T-shirt. It's become a Valentine's Day card. It's been used on ESPN when Jordan Hooper played internationally. And so that's how it started. It was just so my friend, my best friend in Missouri would know I was thinking about it. What I'm happy about is it makes people think of Husker women's basketball. And just that one phrase, sure, there was a time I didn't want to be known as the "where's the beef" guy, or I've fallen and I can't get up, guy. But I'm so proud of it. And it's been great. It's a great way of knowing the program. And I know fans like it. I hear about it all the time. And it started off as just dumb luck.
Yeah, all about the fans indeed. That's so awesome to hear that story, because so many legendary broadcasters, like maybe Mike Breen, they have like the bang call, like that legendary call. So it's awesome to hear your name in that list of people with such recognizable catchphrases. But let's look into the future for this season for Nebraska women's basketball. Some high expectations coming into this season. What are you most excited for as we approach the start of the 2022 season?
What fans sometimes forget is freshmen many times are 13th graders, and then they grow up and become sophomores. And if Alexis Markowski and Alison Widener become sophomores, look out. There have been some players in this program. I'm going to count. I'm going to point to two of those. That the difference between their freshman and their sophomore years, and their freshman years were very good, were unimaginable. Pierre Hardy in the late 2000s carried this team her last 3 years. But as a freshman, she had a lot of potential, made a lot of mistakes. I think a lot of people were like, man, they got to ring that in. And then she was first team all Big 12 her next year and was really the catalyst behind Nebraska knocking off the eventual national champion Baylor Bears in triple overtime at the Devaney Center. And then Corey Montgomery out of Minnesota. And I would say this if Corey were listening, if you were here, Corey, you know I mean this, I love this, but she could not play a lick of defense as a freshman. Great offensive player. And then when she became first team all Big 12 her senior year, I cried because people saw the improvement she had. If Alexis Markowski can improve 10% from being the Big Ten Freshman of the Year, you think about what Nebraska is going to have. And then you think about Alison Widener, who wasn't even a starter until the back half of the season, and how well she played. If she, we're going to see a whole season of Alison Widener. And Widener, with the injury to Sam Ivey, is really going to have to do a lot of those late shot clock drives to the basket that Heidi used to. Nebraska's lucky that if Heidi's not going to play this year, they have somebody we know who can get to the rim and finish, and that's Alison Widener. There's leadership with Izzy Bourne. Enough people don't talk about what Izzy Bourne brings to this team. Not a more respected player among her teammates or really the league. And you back that up with what Jazz Shelley can do. Jazz Shelley is a grown woman now, and she went through a couple of inconsistent years at Oregon, but now she's in a place where this is her second year. She doesn't need to know where the dining hall is. She's comfortable. She knows her teammates. And you think about the weapons around Jazz Shelley, a Markowski, a Widener, and Izzy Bourne, and then some of the great players that Amy Williams has brought in here. There's a reason there's a lot of optimism around this team. And I do think, teams have to learn this. The loss to Gonzaga in the first round of the NCAA tournament to Louisville may be the best thing that happened to this team, because sometimes you realize that, okay, it's great getting to the dance, but it stinks when you lose. And the only way that you're going to really improve is make sure your seed's better. And there's not anybody on this team that wasn't sitting in that locker room after the loss to Gonzaga in Louisville. And I sensed, on the plane ride back, that people were like, we got to get better so we can get a better seed, so we're in a position to maybe even host. So I think there's a lot of maturity on this team from what happened last year, and that's why there's a lot of excitement.
Yeah, and in trying to get that better seed next year, freshman Maggie Mendelson, who's currently playing her heart out for the women's volleyball team right now, she has got a great leaping ability, and she's got some height as well to add to a Markowski front court inside. How do you think her as a freshman may be able to impact potentially off the bench this year?
I know everybody's very optimistic. I'm going to temper my my thoughts. It is so hard. If it was easy, I think you would see a lot of people trying to do this. Now, that said, she's special. And she came to Nebraska because these two coaching staffs, John Cook and Amy Williams, worked together to make this happen. And let's not forget, Maggie Mendelson should be in high school right now. She really is, a year away from being what most of your freshmen is. So that's how special she is. When I've talked to the coaching staff, they really feel like she can do this and play immediately coming in January once the volleyball season is over. I've seen this happen before. The National Volleyball Player of the Year in 2000 and 2001 was Gracia Lee Shapiro from Dorado, Puerto Rico, and she finished the season and then came over and played with Nebraska. It's tough to do, but what Mendelson offers is she has played youth basketball at the highest level and has excelled and was very highly recruited as a basketball player. So it's somebody who, can come through the door ready to play as much as you can as a freshman. But I hope fans don't expect too much, because coming in the middle of the season is going to be kind of hard. But if anybody could do it, I think Maggie could do it. And the coaching staff has great confidence in her, and I think they have different ways that they can put her into the lineup and be successful. They don't want to put her in a position where she can't be successful. And I just love the plans that both coaching staffs have for her.
Yeah, Mendelson will definitely be adding to a very talented team coming into the 2022 season. But Matt, I just want to thank you for your time, for stepping on and being the first guest for Huskers Hoops Live. It's been great.
Well, I wish you the best of luck with your show. Good luck covering both programs this year. There's nothing better than being at Pinnacle Bank Arena in the winter watching Husker Hoops. So I hope everybody can get out there. I'm excited. Let's get it going.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much again, and I'll see you another time.
Thank you.
That was Matt Coatney, the Huskers women's basketball play-by-play broadcaster. You know, such an interesting guy to talk to. So thank you again, Matt, for taking the time out of your day to be the first guest on Huskers Hoops Live. And as it is time to wrap things up from the station, I'd just like to thank all of you, the listeners, this morning. A little bit of technical difficulties getting the first show of Huskers Hoops Live up and running. A couple of kind of snafus during the broadcast, and still working things out as it is just my first time hosting this radio show. But as we do more and more episodes, I can promise you that the quality will continue to go and improve every single week. Whether you're on your way to work, just waking up for the day, or whatever you're up to, I appreciate all the support for the show going forward, and you can tune into Huskers Hoops Live on 90.3 KRNU every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Central Time, all season long. Have a great day, and until we meet again, go Big Red.